we're going to get started. So your body, your hormonal cycle. Oh, that's not, oh, okay, there we go. So agenda. We're going to talk about just some of the misconceptions, the facts about birth control, the effects of birth control. We're going to review the 10 main hormones that are the most important to your cycle, and I'm going to give you a really easy way to remember what they are. We're also going to then dive a bit into each hormonal phase, and we're going to look at it more from the perspective of hormones than the emotional piece of the hormones. Depending on time, I can go a deep dive a little bit deeper into what I mean in terms of the emotional pieces of your hormonal phases. But that's actually going to be, one of the next classes. So I wanted to at least give you the best foundation to understand what's going on, so you can always learn more. And then I'm actually going to give you some homework so that you walk away not just learning something, but also putting something into practice. So just a little bit about me. As you might know from Dreamers and Doers, I'm a flower shop owner, startup founder for technology in the creative space. I have endometriosis. I've been misdiagnosed with endometriosis for about 14 years, and recently was able to primarily holistically put myself into remission. And I did it, within a matter of 6 months. And I went from not being able to walk, literally to the grocery store and having to shut my company down, to then, completely changing my lifestyle and actually starting this new phase of my life, which is becoming a integrative medicine health coach. I've been holistically healing myself for over 10 years, and I realized that through wedding planning, through working with entrepreneurs in the creative production space, the one thing that I consistently loved to do was coach. And I loved working with individuals, and I particularly loved working with women. And once I found this cycle wisdom and worked with it on my own, I realized that even before someone becomes an entrepreneur, this is actually the most important thing that they need to know, because structurally it's going to affect how they make decisions, when they should be making decisions, and really what their energy levels are going to look like, their dietary needs, their physical needs, and it really connects you with your feminine body. And as I've spoken about in Dreamers and Doers, if you don't have a connection to your feminine body, you're pushed into such a different approach to life as this kind of masculine entrepreneur. And I found through my 9 years of being an entrepreneur that I made certain decisions that were in line with my values, and I made other decisions that were completely out of line. And then just, I'm also a sexual abuse and trauma survivor. I have a long history with sexual trauma. So if there's anyone who, if any of this is a little bit triggering for you, I totally understand. If you need to talk about it, please let me know. I've been able to holistically recover from depression, PTSD, and anxiety, so I'm happy to talk about any of that as well outside of this. Okay, so what do we know about our periods? It prepares our bodies for pregnancy. It occurs because we're not pregnant. We have 2 ovaries, even though one ovary ovulates each month, which I have found in the Dreamers and Doers community that most of us actually do not know. So again, we have 2 ovaries, but only one ovary ovulates each month. PMS occurs a few days before we get our periods because we have cravings and mood swings and swelling. And this is something that society has told us over and over again is a natural thing. It's just something that's going to happen. We normally crave protein, extra iron, either during our premenstrual phase or as we come into our period, right? And that's obvious. We're losing lots of blood, and we need to be able to increase the protein and iron in our bodies. And we know that it might arrive between the ages of 12, 14, or 16. That's when our puberty really sets in. And many of us are prescribed birth control to avoid painful periods. And that's pretty much what the basics are, and really what my friends and what other people have told me they know about their periods. Now, even when you go on the internet and you go to a Wikipedia, for example, what information do you find? Because I think one of the things that I've noticed now talking to many women in the past few months is that they only go to the internet and they start Googling things when they want to find out information about what's going on, either with a yeast infection or if they have pain or if there's something that they don't understand, they go to the internet. But what does the internet tell you? The internet says, here's the frequency, here are the quote unquote negative health effects of dealing with your period, here's how to stop it, birth control, here's how to manage it, pads or tampons. Here's why there's taboos around it. Here's why society isn't comfortable discussing it. And here's how other mammals and other animals also have a period and also go through that process in order to create life. And that's kind of what you'll find. Most of the documentation approaches a period as a burden. And there's a small growing community that is absolutely approaching it as a blessing and something that we really need to explore as women. And that community is absolutely growing. So I applaud you guys for being a part of that and being interested. And something to think about is that by not approaching our period with love, we are actively disowning a deeply personal process that happens to us every single month. We're disassociating ourselves with our body. I was just talking to one of the students that's going to be taking the course last night, and actually both students that I was talking to last night, they both said to me, I don't even think about it anymore. It's just something that I don't want to recognize, or I don't think to recognize, and I treat it as if it doesn't exist. Right? And what does that say? You're actively saying to yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically that something that happens every single month in your body isn't important. And we're going to change that concept in that conversation. So before we get started, I want us to express gratitude towards our uterus. And what I actually want you to do is I want you to put your hands on your uterus. Physically put your hands there. Are we good? Did we do that? I can't see anybody, but I hope you did. So now, once we've put our hands on our uterus, let's just talk about what it means to express gratitude to our uterus, right? So I'm going to just give a little bit of a gratitude talk, and it's from a great book that I have. Sometimes in life, things happen too fast. We barely solve one problem when two new problems surface. We're feeling great in the morning, but we're submerged in misery by nightfall. Every day we face interruptions, delays, changes, and challenges. We face personality conflicts and disappointments. Often, when we're feeling overwhelmed, we can't see the lessons of these experiences. One simple concept can get us through the most stressful of times. It's called gratitude. We learn to say thank you for these problems and these feelings, and thank you for the way things are. I don't like this experience, but thank you anyway. We force gratitude until it becomes habitual, and gratitude helps us stop trying to control outcomes. It is the key that unlocks positive energy in our life, and it is the alchemy that turns problems into blessings and the unexpected into gifts. And why I bring that up is because endometriosis was the most painful part of my period journey, but I found an extreme amount of gratitude for it because I was able to see that I was missing this understanding around my body. And as you see, it's completely changed my life. And so I want to bring that gratitude to you guys. So just recognize your uterus, try to feel your uterus, try to give it awareness throughout this conversation. So, and on another point of feeling grateful, your period is now considered a fifth vital sign by the medical community. It wasn't, but recently it's become so because it's such a key indicator of what's going on with your health, right? So if you're having cramps, if you're clotting, if it's extremely heavy, if it's irregular, if you are having, PMDD, which is significant, an even higher level of PMS, it's Your period, your uterus, your feminine body is trying to show you that there are significant health issues going on and that you need to pay attention. And my doctor, who was helping me with my endometriosis, in his book, he talks about how if you cannot solve cramps with 2 Advil, there's an underlying issue going on. And I grew up thinking that cramps are just supposed to be extremely painful. That was it, right? And most of us do think that. So I want you to think about that. If you can't solve your cramps with 2 Advil, there's something else going on. Any questions there at the moment? You good? I don't know if I can see it. Oh, I can see chat. Here we go. Okay. Hannah, do you mind just interrupting me if there are questions? Because it's hard for me to pull up the chat.
Yes, definitely. I'll definitely do that when I see them come through.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's start with the basics. And these were your questions that you guys, shot in. Do your hormones impact your mood? Absolutely. Yes, we'll go through why. Can you control your mood swings? You can. Should you view your mood swings as a negative? Absolutely not. And so we shouldn't look at them as mood swings. We should just look at them as hormonal phases. Will you experience a hormonal cycle with a hormonal contraception? No, you will absolutely not. And I think that's something that we don't understand before we take birth control. Will your hormones be affected by birth control? Absolutely. They will be forever changed. Can you manage your energy by understanding your hormonal cycle? Yes, you can. Can your hormonal cycle affect your eating habits? Absolutely. Can your hormonal cycle create inflammation? Absolutely.
We had a couple of questions come in about the previous chunk, if you want to tackle those. So we have, what about spotting throughout the month, and how do you know when that's an issue?
Okay. So in terms of spotting throughout the month, 1, are you on birth control or not? I would need to know that. And if you're on birth control, it's just called breakthrough bleeding, right? Which is ultimately that, and we're going to talk about what that means, but your system's getting flooded with hormones, and your system may or may not be adapting to that flood of hormones. And so that breakthrough bleeding is an indication of your body not adapting. If you're on birth control. Hannah, did you have a point?
Yeah, so they said she's not on birth control.
She's not. Okay. So she's having breakthrough bleeding. She's not on birth control. Okay. So if that's going on, that's an indicator of a hormonal imbalance. Go ahead. Hannah?
Oh, I didn't say anything. Sorry.
Oh, okay. That's an indicator of a hormonal imbalance. Now, we're not going to cover all the types of hormonal imbalances in this call. There's multiple types. Too high of estrogen, too low of estrogen, too high of progesterone, too low of progesterone, too high of testosterone, too low of testosterone. So if you're having that, you may also have other indicators of a hormonal imbalance. Normally, when you see one sign of a hormonal imbalance, you're going to see other signs of a hormonal imbalance. So looking at it from a holistic perspective, not just from the breakthrough bleeding, would help us get you to the point where you're holistically solving what's going on with your hormonal imbalance. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And then we had one more question come in. Is the recommended non-hormonal pregnancy prevention cycle tracking and other contraceptives such as condoms?
Okay, so I'm actually someone who is now following a natural fertility tracking. I have been on birth control since I was 12 because I had essentially had endometriosis back then, but they had no idea why. So they had no idea that's what it was. But I had such bad symptoms that they immediately put me on birth control. So I've tried every birth control, and I've tried also the copper IUD. If you want something like the IUD, that's your best bet. There's 2 IUDs out there in the US. we're a country that doesn't have as many IUDs as other countries, but there's the copper IUD called the name is off the top of my head. I had it. I can't remember it, but I can always share it with you later. But there's a new one that's also coming out called the Juliet, and Planned Parenthood, I know, is testing it right now. It's a little bit smaller than the other IUD. And so you can do the IUD route. Obviously, there's condoms, and then there's the natural fertility tracking piece, which there are multiple apps out there. I happen to use Ava because Ava actually gives you a wristlet and actually is tracking your temperature and everything else, and really customizing your personal cycle. But I did that only for a little while, then switching to a absolutely natural one, which is my entire cycle is based off of the moon. So that's a whole other conversation that I do not cover in this piece of it. But there are definitely some apps that I can follow up with that I recommend that can help you start to track your cycle. And and we will cover this later, which is that there's only 6 days out of the month that you actually are fertile. And so we're using birth control just to cover those 6 days, which I find very ridiculous. So doing any kind of fertility tracking will help. And then obviously talking with your partner, which is if you do have sex during ovulation, that they cannot come inside you, that they have to pull out, that you have to take some extra precautions and be a little bit more intentional about it. So yeah, that's also a larger conversation, but I hope that helped. So what happens on birth control? Your brain disconnects from your uterus. You do not have a period. It is only breakthrough bleeding. Birth control is attempting to mimic pregnancy because of the amount of hormones it's flushing into your system. And that creates a situation where you do not ovulate, right? So your brain tells your uterus when to create certain hormones, which we're going to cover. And when those hormones get created, those hormones then trigger in your uterus and in your ovaries when to drop an egg. Because the hormones create such a disconnect, you do not ovulate, you do not create those eggs. And so for long periods of time, depending on how long you've been on birth control, that disconnection is existing and kind of gets imprinted in your system. And so there's a period of time once you come off birth control where you can have very significant issues reestablishing that connection. And researchers have found that potentially that connection no longer goes back to what it was at your pre-pill levels. Now, as I just said before, ovulation is the only fertile window in your entire cycle, and it only lasts 6 days out of the month, right? So it lasts during your pre-ovulation as you're coming up into ovulation, and then through ovulation, which only lasts 18 to 24 hours. And then you want to be careful about 2 to 3 days after ovulation, because that's also still a period where your hormones are shifting and it's trying to get ready for a pregnancy. So that period of time is very, very significant. But again, hormone suppression is only happening because of these 6 days out of a full 28-day cycle. It seems kind of crazy when you think about it. And the pill does not resemble your natural fluctuations of hormones. We naturally fluctuate through progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. And what the pill does is it floods you either with a balance of estrogen and progesterone throughout the month, or there's progesterone only packs, but it can never replicate your natural fluctuations. And do not ever let a doctor tell you that it will solve or treat a hormonal imbalance, because it will not. And endometriosis is a disease. Endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, all of those significant issues are caused by hormonal imbalances. Now, and so what that means is that I had a hormonal imbalance at the time when I first started puberty, which allowed endometriosis to occur. Now, results of birth control use, and you've heard of this before, but I want to make it very clear that these things are very real reactions to birth control. And they're found in most women, not just some women. right? So a hormonal imbalance. What do I mean by a hormonal imbalance? I mean missing or irregular periods, light or heavy periods, short cycles, infertility, headaches, digestive problems, a leaky gut, dysbiosis, inflammatory bowel disease, right? So PID, energy reduction, right? Fatigue, adrenal and thyroid issues, right? So adrenal fatigue is something that I very much struggled with. Skin issues, hair loss, dry skin, mood imbalance, depression, anxiety, vaginal issues. And we're talking about vaginal dryness, chronic infection. I was someone who had chronic yeast infections. I probably got anywhere from 10 to 15 yeast infections in a year. Pain with sex, right? And then libido issues, low libido issues. And we'll talk about how that happens and why that happens. And then very significant vitamin, mineral, and antioxidant depletion, specifically around magnesium, B6, and vitamin C. And they found that a study of over 1 million women showed that women who began the pill were more likely to then be prescribed antidepressants. And that was from the Journal of American Medicine Association. Now, also increased risk of thyroid issues, blood clots leading to stroke, breast, cervical, and liver cancers, diabetes, heart attacks, and autoimmune diseases. Before I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and again, I'm talking about my own personal story, but I'm doing that because I want you to see how that can lead to, taking birth control or having a mild hormonal imbalance can lead to something bigger like an endometriosis or infertility issues or having to go through IVF eventually. And your autoimmune diseases can appear because your gut and your liver and your adrenals are not operating properly. It's all because of a hormonal imbalance. And before I was diagnosed with endometriosis, I had such immune issues. It was insane, but I was like the picture of health on the outside. I mean, going to yoga 3 to 4 times a week, looked great, on the outside, but on the inside, it was a disaster. And I was very shocked, right, that I had a disease because I thought I was at the picture of my health. Now, also a 300% increased risk of developing Crohn's disease, which is very painful because that's affecting your liver and your gallbladder. Now, how does this happen? Synthetic hormones flood your system, as I've spoken about. Your brain believes that there's enough hormones in your system, right? And so because it believes that there's enough hormones, it prevents it from releasing 2 specific hormones, your follicle-stimulating hormone and your luteal hormone. And those 2 things then prevent your ovulation from happening. And so if one hormone is out of balance, the other hormones follow. And why this is important is because most women are on birth control packs that have estrogen in them. But even if you're not on birth control, estrogen is so rampant in our environment, our skincare, our food, and our household products. So women without birth control, right? So the woman on here who has breakthrough bleeding, you are most likely having higher levels of estrogen regardless of being on birth control because of our environment, unfortunately. And until there's a recognition around that and an active adjustment of your lifestyle to appropriately handle that high flux of estrogen, the natural hormonal imbalance is going to occur without birth control. And so all the things that I discussed now with the liver, the gut, etc., are also happening, again, regardless of birth control or not. It's just if you have a hormonal imbalance. And I was actually off birth control for many years before I had this diagnosis of endometriosis. So my body had somewhat cleared itself of the birth control. Now, the liver. Okay, and any questions? I should stop there. Any questions? We're good, Hannah? Or no?
We're good so far.
What'd you say?
It's like we're good so far.
Cool. So the liver detoxifies the estrogen in order to prepare it to essentially make you poop, right? So the liver is taking all the estrogen throughout your system, whether it's coming in through birth control or your environment or your skincare, and it's detoxifying it and it's metabolizing it. And it's doing that before it goes to your stomach, your gut, and then your kidneys. And if you have any issues, meaning you're constipated, you're not pooping every day, you have to poop every day. And if you're not pooping within 90 minutes of waking up every single day, you're constipated, okay? And if you're constipated or you have gut flora that's out of balance, any estrogen is going to then become reactive and create even further estrogen, right? So again, this is without birth control. And if it is with birth control, this is absolutely happening, no questions asked, because you're already introducing estrogen into your system that you do not need. Now, the liver creates something very specific, which is a binding sex hormone, SHBG. That hormone controls your libido, right? So SHBG, which we'll cover, has testosterone, ditestosterone, and estrogen, and all three get combined in order to increase your libido or decrease your libido. And so a study of women showed that with the pill, that hormone remains elevated regardless of how long they stay on the pill or not, and if they even get off the pill. And so they find that with the pill's introduction into your system, this hormone, this SHBG, this binding sex hormone, it will permanently affect your liver genes, which is very, very, very scary, right? And why that's scary is because benign liver tumors have become increasingly common. There's a high risk of bleeding and rupturing, and these liver tumors were not seen until the introduction of birth control in the 1960s. So it's very important. PMS also was not documented until our society went from an agricultural one to an industrial one. So right around that same time in the early 1900s. And again, if your bile, your poop from your liver is toxic with these over amounts of estrogen, it's being sent to your gallbladder. And so it increases your risk of gallbladder disease. And the things you should look out for with gallbladder disease are 5 things. Being a woman, so being a female, being fertile, being 40, around 40, and also having fair skin, and if you're overweight. And I know that sounds odd, but that's what they have found through research. Those are your 5 risk factors of eventually contracting gallbladder disease. Now, if the liver is processing the estrogen, it's then shooting it up to the gut, right? And so we're talking about the gut here. So again, birth control or not birth control, if you have excess amounts of estrogen or you have low amounts of estrogen and higher amounts of progesterone, if any hormonal imbalance is going on, there's going to be issues within the gut. The gut is the epicenter of everything, right? Because it absorbs your nutrients from the food that you're eating, and then it also chooses what hormones it needs, and it eliminates the hormones that it doesn't need, right? And so it's influencing your mood, your weight, and the inflammation in your body. And ultimately, you need a healthy gut to remove the excess estrogen. And if you don't have a healthy gut, then what's going to happen is that the estrogen is going to force its way back in into your gut, right? Eventually creating a leaky gut. And it's going to undermine the liver, right? Because the liver already did its job. And so it's going to then bring that extra estrogen right back in, even if the liver already detoxified the estrogen to a certain amount. And chronic medication, which is what birth control is, ultimately alters that gut flora. Now, that creates an environment of overgrowth, bacteria, yeast, and ultimately, as I was just saying, it destroys your gut integrity, potentially inflaming the digestive tract or creating a leaky gut. And why is that? Because everything's connected, right? Like, we in Western medicine take this approach of we're going to heal one organ and we're going to heal one part of the body, but that is not how your hormonal system works, right? So if you see your nervous system, your circulatory system, and your digestive tract, all of these things are interconnected. And so understanding that, again, if one hormone stops functioning properly, the others will follow. That shows you how everything can start to either overcompensate or get off track. And it then affects multiple organs. Now, what do we do? And do we have questions?
No questions so far.
Okay. Are we feeling scared? Good? How's everyone feeling over there? Any emotion?
Curious.
Curious. Cool. Okay. So, what do? We need to redefine the meaning of our uterus. We need to understand our 10 main hormones, and I'm going to show you a funny little sentence that I came up with to remember what those hormones are. And we're going to review our cycle pertaining to these hormones. And then we're also going to prioritize learning about ourselves and giving her a name, right? So we ignore our uterus and we ignore this part of our body, and doctors approach it as this baby maker. I want you to approach it differently. I want you to recognize it as something that you're protecting and is a part of you. And so giving it a name was one of the first things that I did even before I went on this path. I gave my uterus and my vagina a name, oddly enough, I think probably 9 years ago, as I was really recovering from sexual trauma, because I was like, I can't let anything happen to her again. And I think it's a very kind of funny but very uplifting thing when you actually name this part of your body. So what are your woman parts or your lady parts? Your uterus, it's a muscular organ. Remember, ladies, it's an organ. Like, it is not just something that needs to be like ripped out through a hysterectomy. It's not something that's not important. It's an organ that we're actually not focusing on and we're shutting down by use of birth control. Or we're just not paying attention to, and we're allowing it to have this hormonal imbalance, causing havoc for the rest of our system. It is a part of your reproductive system, and it's about the size of a small fist. And the inner lining is called the endometrium. And then the vagina, it connects the cervix of the uterus to the exterior, and it's part of the lower part of the reproductive tract. Very simple, straightforward, right? But what does society say about our uterus? Look it up online, talk to doctors, talk to your friends. The way that we've approached it is, the point is of the uterus is for it to house and nourish a fetus. That is its role. We take birth control to prevent that from happening. And after we get off birth control, that's what we expect it to do. And what does the vagina do? Literally, if, again, you Google this and or talk to your friends about it, the first thing that people are going to say is either it's receiving penis, right? Just straight up. It's a birth canal and it bleeds. That's kind of our approach. If you're not a heterosexual female, then you will absolutely take problem with this, right? Because you don't receive penis and you might not ever want to have a child. You might be approaching your life very differently. And so looking at it from that perspective automatically puts the female body into a view of a patriarchal one, right? It's there to serve something other than yourself. And so what do I want us to say? What are we going to say about it? Redefining it. Your uterus creates the hormones that you need for your natural cycle each month. That's its role. If the hormones from your natural cycle then create a pregnancy, amazing. But that is not the role, the main function of your uterus, right? You have to have this cycle in order to create a pregnancy. Your vagina, it provides you pleasure to also help naturally regulate your hormones. Your having masturbation or having sex creates very specific hormones in your system that then helps you prepare better for your premenstrual phase and your menstrual phase. And you can see a significant decrease in cramps and in discomfort if you're regularly masturbating and regularly having sex. And when I say sex, that means you are orgasming. You're not just having sex, because I know that I still have friends that, that do have sex but are not consistently orgasming with their partner. You need to, in order for those hormones to appropriately get into your system. So, public service announcement. Hormones, they have been defined consistently by the medical community as female and male, but through research and through just understanding the English language, you will understand, as I bring these to you, that both females and males have these sex hormones. And so testosterone, it's labeled a male hormone. We have testosterone in our body, so it's not a male hormone, right? It's an androgynous hormone that each of us have because it's a sex hormone. So again, we're going to call them sex hormones. So questions before I move on? Nothing, Hannah?
Yeah, I think we're good for now.
Cool. Okay, so I came up with a weird sentence. I'm a weird person. And a lot of images came to mind for me as I put the sentence together, but it was to help you think about the 10 major hormones that are affecting your cycle. So Pippa proposed to Esther tonight. She detests fish, lollipops, clarity, and prom. Why I put this weird sentence together is because I think it's so odd that you will remember it, but it also somewhat oddly lines up with actually what's going on within each of these hormones. So prolactin Pippa, that is actually going to insinuate that Pippa might be pregnant because prolactin is what creates the milk in your breasts. Prolactin Pippa proposed because of progesterone. Progesterone has the effect to chill you out, right? And so wouldn't it be great if we were calm and chill when we went to propose to someone? And she did that to the estrogen dominant Esther. Estrogen and Esther just rhymed. And that's because of testosterone tonight. Testosterone increases our sex drive, our energy, our libido. We can do things in the evening. We can have the energy to get things done when we have higher levels of testosterone, and we do during certain parts of our cycle. And then she detests fish, lollipops, clarity, and proms. Increased SHBG, which is that sex hormone that binds dihydrotestosterone, testosterone, and estrogen together. That makes her, so SHBG makes her dihydrotestosterone detest fish, which is FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, LSH, which is your luteal stimulating hormone, lollipops, and your corpus luteum, which is clarity. And your corpus luteum is the actual phase when you know whether or not you are pregnant. So it's giving you clarity. Your LSH, your lollipops, right, is when you're ovulating. So if you think of a big lollipop, you can think of a big egg in your ovulation. And when you think of FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, that's exactly when your brain is essentially creating the hormones to say, hey, we're going to get that egg to swim, right? So we're going to get that fishy to move. And those three things also then affect your prostaglandin proms, right? So prostaglandin being then the hormones that are pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory as your body's either accepting a pregnancy or not accepting a pregnancy. And so it's the last phase. And why I also put that in there, and I said proms, is because obviously there's a societal joke around, getting pregnant at prom, or having, wanting to just like have sex as a young person at prom. And it just seemed dumb, but kind of tied everything together. So I hope that makes sense. So Pippa proposed to Esther tonight. Prolactin Pippa. This is formed in the brain. It's stimulating progesterone during the premenstrual phase, which is the corpus luteum, right? Premenstrual is the third part, well, really the fourth part of your phase, which we'll go into. And it also creates the milk, right? So again, your prolactin, your brain is creating progesterone, and that hormone is then getting you to the phase when you're getting ready for your period and or you're creating milk. Now let's talk about progesterone again. It creates the feeling of calm, as I said, during the premenstrual phase. Now, if you don't feel calm before you get your period, that means you have lower progesterone. So again, that's a sign of a hormonal imbalance. And that's normally because your estrogen is too high and it's not regulating properly with your progesterone. What the progesterone also does is it prepares the endometrial sac, your womb, for a pregnancy. And if it doesn't end up accepting a pregnancy, then obviously that sac will shed. And that hormone is absolutely necessary for healthy maintenance of a pregnancy. Now, estrogen ester. Estrogen is created by your ovaries. Your brain signals to your ovaries when to create this estrogen. And smaller amounts are also created by your adrenals and from fat cells in food. So again, how you eat and what you eat and your gut, extremely important. And your adrenals, which is a part of your endocrine system, also important. Your endocrine system, which we don't cover here, is a combination of all your different hormonal glands, and it's directly connected to your autoimmune functioning. Estrogen regulates the cycle, maintains a pregnancy, keeps your bones strong. Men do have estrogen, okay? That's why we're not calling them a female hormone. Testosterone tonight, it's produced in the ovaries, just like estrogen is, also in the adrenals. It's playing a vital role in bone strength, brain function, muscle mass, energy levels, and libido. Your testosterone is significantly higher at certain parts of your cycle, in the beginning parts of your cycle, and it's much lower at other parts of your cycle. And so when you see an uptick in testosterone, that's when you want to have sex. We'll talk about that. So she detests fish, lollipops, clarity, and proms. Sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, the she. This is produced by the liver, and it binds tightly to the testosterone, the dihydrotestosterone, and the estrogen. And so again, if we have a misfunctioning liver, or not misfunctioning, but a dysfunctioning liver because of a hormonal imbalance, because there's too much estrogen in our system, or not enough testosterone in our system, then you get a significant increase within this SHBG because it's trying to overcompensate for the lack of regular hormones in its system. And by overcompensating, it's then decreasing your libido. Dihydrotestosterone detests. What does it detest? It is essentially something that is not significantly seen within the female body. It's really a small amount of testosterone. It is made by your ovaries. It is absolutely something that is only understood from more of a male concept than rather a female concept, but it absolutely significantly plays a part in your libido. Now, fish, follicle stimulating hormone. This is released by your brain, and it's released by your brain in the first 14 days of your cycle, which means that this is happening actually when you're menstruating. And we're going to talk about how your menstrual phase is a process of a death and a rebirth. You're getting rid and shedding your endometrial lining, but at the same time, your body is getting ready for a completely new phase. And so it's sending these hormones from your brain to your ovary to say, hey, let's get the follicles ready. Let's get this egg ready for the next phase, which is luteinizing hormone, lollipops. And that's your ovulation, right? So it's saying to your system, hey, we dropped this egg. This egg is now ready to now ready for ovulation, and my body also is ready to potentially accept sperm. And when this is happening, the corpus luteum, the CL, which is the clarity part, is producing progesterone because it's getting your body ready for a potential pregnancy, right? So something drops, that thing that got dropped is ready to go. The thing that got dropped now is going into the process of potential fertilization. As it's going through the process of potential fertilization, your body's getting ready to create a womb for that fertilized egg. And that's going through the 14 to 28 days of your cycle. Now, corpus luteum, clarity. It is essentially, as we just said, creating that fertilization arena for that egg. And so it's either disintegrating because it wasn't fertilized, or it's then producing the progesterone to support a pregnancy. And so then you gain that clarity. Am I pregnant or am I not pregnant? And you actually can know very, very early on after ovulation whether or not your body has accepted a pregnancy. And then the prostaglandin proms. This is an oil-based hormone, and it's found throughout your body. It's not just, dictated to your sex hormones. And some of it's pro-inflammatory and some of it's anti-inflammatory, right? And why that's important is because when you have a hormonal imbalance, your body is normally in a state of inflammation. And so if you naturally have hormones that create inflammation, you naturally have hormones that disrupt inflammation. But if you have an additional reality going on within your body that's additionally creating inflammation, then your system, more likely than not, is more inflamed. And so that's, again, when you see dietary issues, food sensitivities, stomach cramps, or stomach issues either within your period or outside of your period. This is when you'll see bloating and gas from any kind of food. And that's being conscious of the fact that that's what's going on, and that's why that's going on. And these prostaglandins are secreted by the endometrium, and they're required for ovulation. They're also required for the sperm mobility, and they're creating contractions. So again, like I said, it's creating contractions at birth, but what I really mean, what's more appropriate for us, is that these create the contractions during cramps. So if these are at all out of whack, your cramps are much worse because of it. So where did she propose? Where did Pippa propose? The endometrium. All of this really is going on really shows up within the endometrium, right? So you have the brain, you have the ovaries, you have the uterus, you have everything interacting, the gut, the liver, but really where's the epicenter for us? And it's in that womb, right? It's in that inner lining of the uterus, and that's the lining that gets lost during your period. And it can't be formed without the right levels of hormones. And it's very, very sensitive to levels of hormones. And that's why endometriosis is a hormonal disease. And that's where it comes from. The meaning of it comes from is because it directly affects your endometrium lining. And so the perfect balance, or the right person, right? I won't say perfect balance. Everyone has a different balance of estrogen and progesterone, and the right balance for you is what's going to determine your health. And so as you're undergoing your cyclical changes, these levels of estrogen and progesterone need to stay consistent in order for your endometrial lining to also stay consistent. So prolactin Pippa proposed because of progesterone to estrogen dominant ester because of testosterone tonight. The increased sex hormone makes her dihydrotestosterone detest fish, lollipops, clarity, and proms. And that's all within the endometrium. And here's a nice little graph, which I'm going to send you these slides if you pass the emails over. I think actually we're going to share this anyway. But you can take a look at this graph a little bit more in depth, but it shows you the levels and where things change and how things grow and then break apart, right? And then what happens through your uterus as well. Any questions? That's the chunk of hormones, and now we're going to get into the much easier, understandable stuff. And we're almost done.
There is no questions.
Okay. Am I losing everyone? Am I talking too fast, or am I okay?
You're great.
Okay,
great.
Cool. So what's happening during each phase? When you get your period, that is the first phase of your cycle. Okay, it is not the last phase. Because we take birth control and because we understand the pill box, we think that our period is the last phase of our cycle. It's not. It is the first phase, right? And that's why we were talking about the FSH, right? The fish, because it is not only happening during a time when you're releasing your endometrial lining, it's odd that it's happening during that time. We don't think of our menstruation as being this kind of rebirth phase. We only think of it as a dying phase. And so you need to think about menstruation as from this perspective of it's a cool phase, right? It's when you can be dark and you can be deep and you can be feminine and you can be wise. Your energy is going to be low. Your hormones are dropping, and that's going to shift your perspective on your life, on your diet, on your exercise. And the way that I think about it is this wise old woman phase. Who am I and what do I think about? You know, how do I see the world? If I'm 100 years old, kind of surveying my life, right? Because your energy is low, you're not supposed to be working at high levels that you have been, and you're supposed to be really reflective about what your life is and what it looks like. And you're able to see things a lot more clearly because you don't have this huge fluctuation of hormones, right? You're not getting ready to make a baby, and you're also not getting ready to bleed, right? So it's this nice level where you can really see things clearly. And so, as I said, your estrogen and your progesterone, they drop. That means once they drop, you get your period. At the same time, your brain is, again, creating that fish, that FSH, that follicle stimulating hormone, the death, the rebirth. And your ovaries already start to make estrogen to get ready for the next lining, right? So, again, it's this wise old woman. You're recognizing where you came from this past month, what happened this past month, or what happened this past year. You're reflecting and you're getting ready for the next phase of your cycle. Second phase, and you'll notice I didn't point this out, but the PowerPoint is also done in a way to kind of reflect the bright versus the cool. So the cool being that lavender color, and the bright being this white or gray. And the cool really supposed to be representing your quote unquote feminine side, your yin side, and the bright really more representing your quote unquote masculine side, your yang side, your bright side. I'd like to call it your bright versus your cool versus feminine and masculine. And your pre-ovulation is when you come right out of bleeding. You're bright, you're happy, you're exploratory. And one of the things that emotionally comes up is puberty, right? Because this is actually the beginning of your cycle again. And so your body, as we talked about, is preparing for its next cycle. And so the way that you have to think about it is, if I just died or if I just went through the final stages, who am I when I get rebirth, right? You're a teenager. You're a child again. You're coming into this new phase. You're bright. You're happy. You're recognizing where you came from and where you're trying to go, and you start to plant the seeds for where you're trying to go. And not only is your body planting the seeds for where you're going, but mentally and professionally, you can start to do that with your projects as well. So this is the time to really get things going, to get yourself moving on any project that you want to do. But I have to note, and I have to tell you that if you do not rest properly during the menstrual phase, you are going to feel very groggy coming into this pre-ovulation phase. And it's very important to recognize that, because the menstrual phase is where your body is doing so much work, and we don't give ourselves the time to rest, and we do want to just kind of pretend as if it's not going on. But if you don't really, clue into it, the rest of this cycle is going to be hard for you. And so watch that. So again, going back to pre-ovulation, your estrogen rises. That's then going to signal your lollipop, which is your ovulation. Your testosterone increases. That makes you want to have sex. That increases your libido. That's where your SHBG comes into play, right? Where your she comes into play, where you want to have sex, you want to put yourself out there. And then we go into ovulation. right? And ovulation is where your egg is ready to get fertilized, and you're the brightest, you're the sexiest, you have the highest amount of energy. When I'm ovulating, I can pull all-nighters. Literally this weekend or last weekend, I was ovulating, I was up all night. I certain nights I do work, other nights like I end up going out with friends. I don't drink anymore, I can't drink, but I still can go out, and I don't drink coffee. Like, I don't drink caffeine, I don't drink coffee. I can't do any of that because of endometriosis. I naturally have that crazy amount of energy because I'm in tune with my ovulation. And you're this seductress. You're attracting the energy and the projects and the people that you need for anything in your life. And the way that you can look at it, if you're not wanting to have a baby, is that this is the time when you're birthing and you're launching projects, right? You're putting yourself out there and what you're working on into the world. And that's makes sense, right? Because bodily, your egg is getting released. You're putting something out there, right? So your emotions are directly and in sync, right, with what's going on within your body. It's crazy. And so when this happens, your body starts to primarily make progesterone, again, to support that egg. And so as that progesterone is increasing, you're headed into premenstrual. And we talked about that. Your premenstrual is when you feel calm and you can propose, right? You're kind of at this, you're starting to come into this wise phase, but not only are you wise, you're fierce. And the way that I think about it is, it's like this fierce mothering phase. Who are you as a mother to yourself? Because your body is actively saying, I'm trying to mother this thing to come to life. And don't think about it from a perspective of a pregnancy. Think about it as, I launched this project, or I launched this thing into the world, and now I'm mothering it along to get to it, for it to get to the next phase, for it to get to the next stage, right? And so what you're doing in this phase normally is you're closing things up. If you started things during pre-ovulation, you launch during ovulation, you're bringing things full circle premenstrual, and you're starting to take note of, okay, how did things go? What went well? What didn't go well? And you're looking at yourself from that perspective so that you can then appropriately tap into your wise old woman phase, which is next. Now, I say fiercely emotional because this also is still the phase where we know that we can have PMS. And I just went through this week, earlier in the week, like, I was very emotional, and I was okay with it because I was like, these emotions are coming up for a reason. These conversations, even though they're tough and even though I don't want to have them, they're happening for a reason. And so I'm grateful that I'm having them. And I'm grateful that my hormones are in such a fluctuation that it's pushing me to have these kind of very real, very intense conversations that may have needed to be had. But I've been avoiding them because I've just been in this kind of testosterone, sex-oriented phase where I'm like, I don't want to talk about anything emotional. Like, I just want to get shit done. I don't have time, right? And so this gives you the time to tap into that and say, actually, now I do have the time. Let's talk about it. But you will have low energy. And so I think the hardest thing about this phase is going from such a crazy amount of energy from ovulation into this such a significant dip, right? It really drops. And it's such a drop that you're not aware that it's going to happen. And so you try to keep staying on those levels of ovulation, but you can't. And because you can't, that's when your body gives you cramps, gives you PMS, creates all these other symptoms, because your body's saying to you, slow the fuck down, woman. Sit your ass down and like chill out, because I have shit to do and you're really fucking with me right now. Sorry for the language, but just to give you color, that's what your body's saying to you. And so, right, that's what that's saying here. Your eggs are hanging out, you're traveling down through your uterus, your hormones significantly drop. And if that's all going on and you have a hormonal imbalance, or you're not recognizing your body, then your prostaglandins, your proms, they're going to cause cramps, right? And you don't want to go to the prom if you've got cramps. So that's it. I'm about 406. Awesome. So your homework. I want you to write a letter to your uterus. I want you to talk to it and say, if you're angry at it, if you love it, if you appreciate it. I want you to tell your uterus whatever you want to tell it, because you need to form a relationship with it, and you need to get out these emotions that you've never been asked before, right? So I want you to write a letter. I want you to choose a name. I'm going to choose a name for her. I think it's really important to personify her. And then if you want further updates, please in the chat put your email down, so that I can copy those emails and put them into my email list. Every Friday I send out new content. It's a 10-minute video sometimes, it's a blog post, but it's always educating you. And if you want to be a part of the course, it is launching tomorrow. So it's only a few spots. It is filled, but if there's 1 or 2 people from Dreamers and Doers who wanted to come in, be happy to get you in. And we can have a call today or tomorrow to just do the intake and get you going. So that's it.